Why is it so important to get this carbon dioxide balance right? Because when it's not right, when it's dysregulated, the oxygen supply to brain cells is compromised. The blood does not deliver up oxygen to brain cells so effectively. And of course this compromises brain function. Dysregulation of breathing chemistry is in fact surprisingly common, and easily the most common form that it takes is overbreathing or hyperventilation. Because breathing regulation is such a key part of physiology, overbreathing can cause some significant problems. Of course it's a matter of degree. It's not usually bad enough to cause what you might call medical symptoms, but it often does cause, or at least contributes to, problems like fatigue, brain fog and mood problems. Most people have heard of hyperventilation in the context of a panic attack, but a panic attack is usually the result of an extreme degree of overbreathing. Much more commonly there's a mild degree of overbreathing that you may not even be aware of. But the trigger is usually some form of stress. In the last module, we looked at how stress can trigger chest-based breathing, and this is certainly connected to overbreathing. We'll come back to this point later. What are the symptoms of overbreathing? Well, it's useful to divide the symptoms into acute or short-term and then chronic or long-term. Acute symptoms result from transient overbreathing or transient worsening of breathing, and they include a feeling of tightness or restriction in the chest, maybe even pain, shortness of breath or laboured breathing, anxiety or even panic, or just emotional volatility. This happens because the outer part of the brain, the cortex, isn't able to keep in check emotional impulses as it normally would, because it doesn't have the energy due to a lack of oxygen. So anxiety can be both cause and consequence of overbreathing. And for the same reason you can struggle to focus, or feel foggy or even faint, lightheaded and dizzy, or spaced out or far away as though you're disconnected from the world. You can have nausea, sweating or palpitations. Now, just like chest-based breathing, overbreathing can start off as a short-term reaction to stress, but it can also become habitual. When that happens, the body has to adapt to overbreathing, and it can adapt, but the adaptation is far from ideal, and it can give rise to much more entrenched symptoms that aren't obviously connected to breathing, such as fatigue and low energy and low motivation, insomnia or disturbed sleep, depression, chronic anxiety and other mood problems, and a tendency to headaches and migraines. Poor executive function, which means poor concentration, poor short-term memory or the capacity to hold things in mind, and the ability to keep your purpose and avoid distractions and procrastination. Chronic overbreathing can be connected to gastrointestinal problems such as bloating, indigestion or IBS, and muscle problems, pains, cramping and spasms, and numbness and tingling associated with poor circulation in the hands and feet, and a tendency to have cold hands and feet. There are certain signs that aren't necessarily unpleasant or a problem on their own level, but which, if you notice them a lot, can suggest that you're habitually overbreathing. Sighing is the most common one, also yawning. Irregular breathing and unconsciously holding the breath so that you find you have to take a bigger breath to catch up. Chest breathing and mouth breathing are signs of overbreathing too. And I want to mention one consequence of chronic overbreathing. This is a result of the way that the body is forced to adapt as best it can to the overbreathing. The kidneys have to make an adjustment to what's called electrolytes, and that means the minerals present in body fluids. What happens is that the kidneys start losing magnesium and potassium in urine. These are of course important nutrient minerals, and magnesium especially is important to brain function. Deficiency is associated with anxiety, and since deficiency is common enough anyway, you don't really want to be losing any more magnesium.